just answering questions with waptek. Here we go. My question is this: how can the most self-important people on earth possibly go back to their offices at the Capitol and make that vote after so much riffraff have just been there and done who knows what? Placed booby traps or lay in wait hidden out of in that sprawling place. I'm pretty sure they searched the place and checked it out, but yeah. Unless there's been some type of theater involved by both sides to make the people look even worse or ever worse, I think they all should be impeached and real people placed in office. Totally not agreeing with you. So anyway, yeah, I know. Yeah, it's just make a law saying that you can't hold office of any kind more than a certain number of years or number of terms. I would make it, 2 elections for everything. And after you've been elected within one layer of federal, state, county, and local, you can only do it one more time. So you only get 2 times at each layer. You can go from, president to, House or Senate representative, yada yada, legislator, then down to the state, same thing, and then finally county, and then city, and then dog catcher, twice each. Career politicians piss me off. I don't think it's possible for them to ever be not corrupt. Next, the person says, the Constitution does allow for elections to be overturned. Look what happened with Claudia Tenney. I was speaking specifically of the U.S. presidential election. I was also speaking of the fact that you can't just retroactively uncertify the vote for every state just because you want the U.S. Congress to do it, not even addressing each individual state, but deciding to overrule literally the vote of all states by just placing Donald Trump in power. But you've decided to weasel this about Claudia L. Tenney, who was certified the Republican winner of the U.S. Representative's position for New York's 22nd District, Congressional District, by 109 votes from the original 12 votes. She's never actually not won. She lost to somebody who was a spoilsport, and both of them were really hissy-fitting about how votes were counted. I'm going to list all the different shit they did, but the point is, it wasn't overturned by the Constitution allowing it. This is a state deciding who was their representatives. They can appoint them, but they use an election. And the Constitution of the state also did not allow for it to be overturned once it was certified. It doesn't. You're simply wrong about the U.S. Constitution. In this case, the state Constitution wasn't overturned. It hadn't been certified yet because they're not required to, for representatives, certify before a certain date if it's still contended by both parties. And I would make a rule that says, unless you've both been, both sides here, but let's look at all this shit. But anyway, a judge ordered the district-wide recanvassing of all ballots, including provisional and disputed ones that both of them had excluded, and told them both to shut up and count the ballots based on, was a person in good conscience and good faith dumping a ballot in a box and it got thrown out. Let's list the listings that were allowed in the argument. She had a 12-vote lead the entire time. It wasn't overturned by any stretch of the imagination, but let's go on. Contesting votes based on votes cast in the wrong county, but the right district. Or in the right district, but the wrong polling place or the wrong county, because districts don't match counties necessarily. Voters who were listed as purged when they weren't supposed to be. And don't assume which party did the purging this time. I'm not kidding about that. Absentee ballots dropped in a ballot drop box, but at the wrong election district, but on time, which means it was within possession of the organization that counts the ballots and is supposed to be responsible for it, but they didn't deliver it to the correct location in time. That's not a failing on the part of the voter, and again, it was right on one of those lines where the county, the district, and I don't know what else line was meeting up, and they threw it in the ballot box that was across the street. So that really happened. Gerrymandering is a fucking problem, guys. But anyway, various details where they decided not to count it. The judge said you have to, or not, depending on which place. They were sent to the correct polling place, but it was after the state deadline, but that's not the fault of the person who voted. In one case, 3 days before the damn deadline. or whatever the timing was, because, well, here we go. Election day, same day registered voters erroneously not registered, even though they just finished it, signatures on ballots that did not match signatures in the state voter database, and on the previous thing I just mentioned, people who were voting as military people who managed to get within the confines of the state and dump it into a ballot box instead of putting it in the mail system. But we're not making it extra complicated here to where a vet can't fucking vote. If someone's voting in good faith and is trying not to break any rules and you can find some technicality, stop assuming you should kick their vote to the curb. And you don't know whether it was for Republican or Democrat. Neither did they. They didn't just find 100 votes or 80 or 90 votes or something. They found 1,000 votes, and it still ended up with her winning. It was not overturned. And it wasn't the Supreme Court overturning. It was the lower court deciding, stop squabbling and let us count the damn votes and stop interfering. Basically, it told both sides to shut up. Some of them were excluded because it wasn't just technicalities. Some were excluded because it was a technicality, but it was unreasonable to count the votes. Judgment call. Sovereign citizens. I suggest you look those words up in a dictionary of law before you use them in the same sentence. Now, normally a person's pointing out that proves that sovereign citizens, as they call themselves, are full of shit. But then the person goes on to say, you're making yourself look very illiterate saying them together. I think you have no idea what law is. It's a shame that people living in the public are content with privileges and benefits when we have rights given to us by God Almighty, which has no effect on whether the lions eat us during Colosseum Day. Status of sovereign that cannot be taken away by the statutes. Wake up, people. Those aren't laws, and U.S. citizens are not sovereign. Our Constitution says the people, as a group, are sovereign. Citizens are all committing treason against our Constitution. Calling yourself a citizen should have a penalty for death. Wake up, America. Basically what the person's saying. You can read the direct quote below. So I'm getting things wrong because I'm using an expression you don't like hearing anymore because it proves your side of the argument is full of it because you don't know the difference. Well, let's talk about that. Sovereignty carries an implication of autonomy. To have sovereign power is to be beyond the power of others, specifically. And more important than all of that, the right to protection from lawsuits and to be the dominant or supreme authority over others. The right to take private property for public use only, in some cases, and the power to make laws. But as a political concept, it refers to the dominant power and supreme authority that is permitted to make laws. In the United States, like most modern democracies, sovereign power rests with the people, and in many cases exercised through the representatives in a Congress or a Parliament, Commons, etc., or by direct vote, direct democracy, aka mob vote. Always to control representatives that are a small portion of the population on purpose so they can be easily bullied. And through a government which has no power beyond that can actually affect the majority of the population. Except when they maintain a standing army that's just slightly larger than the percentage of the last time they had a revolt in the South. Power from the barrel of a gun. In a monarchy, supreme power resides with the sovereign, or king, who exercises their power without limitation or consequence from a presumption of being handpicked by God. No, your power through God thing doesn't work with us in the United States. That's explicitly not permitted. That's sovereign. You can't have that. We, the people, overrule the king. You claiming to be sovereign puts you in the same position as being that. And by definition, that you have rights given to you by God Almighty, God-given rights, but you demand that we do not have the contract you sign. The social contract is if you benefit from this society and culture, you can exit it, or you can be ruled by the masses through our representatives, our president, and in some cases, if necessary, through our military putting down an insurrection. Persons born or naturalized in and or subject to the jurisdiction of the United States are presumed to be citizens of the United States unless otherwise noted, currently, and or within the state they reside. It's presumed. Unless otherwise noted, if you're born here and there's no evidence to the contrary, it's assumed you're a citizen, even if you can't prove it, because people at one time didn't have good documentation. Now that we're all digitized, but anyway, African Americans weren't citizens until 1866 because it was inconvenient to make them citizens. 1898, U.S.-born children were allowed to be citizens even if they were born to non-presidents. This was non-citizens. If you had a child on U.S. soil, literally on the ground, by the way, one of the interpretations was, and witnessed by the court by literally giving birth on the courthouse steps, but making sure your butt was literally on dirt. Your child was an American citizen and became an inconvenient problem. They couldn't take the kid from you because that was against the law, so you were given de facto pseudo-citizenship status. Up until the 70s or 80s when this was thrown out, you know, that anchor baby thing that Donald Trump's family used. Children born to members of Indian tribes and or governed by tribal legal systems were not U.S. citizens until 1924 when it became handy to make them American citizens so that they could be abused, used, and exploited for whatever. Jim Crow also had to be finally chucked into the curb at one point as well. Citizenship is something that is conferred by acknowledgement and later on by not having an argument against. It is presumed, unless you identify yourself in some way, that you're a citizen. But within the United States, foreigners from Mexico are subject to our laws. Some of you do not like the idea that you are subject to the laws by being in America, but you want all of the Mexicans that cross the border to be subject to our laws, and sometimes forget that about 80% of the ones you're yelling at are naturalized citizens or were born here, and they're third-generation Americans. I have a big problem with assholes pulling this shit on my channel, in case you can't tell. Did you know it's all a fiction? Lawyers are a fraud, governments are the fiction, corruption. There is only a contract by consent. There is no law. There is only commerce. Please shut up. Really, try it. You may learn something. On this note, I have an operating system on my computer that I've never consented to their terms of use on. Even Linux has a consent form I don't fill out. I make it to where I've altered it without ever viewing it for that iteration for my customer and for me, so that it never ever brings up the idea that I've agreed to let them tunnel into my computer and fuck with it. I disable auto-update because it's broken. I can manually update, but I have to alter every install not to make me click wrap a license. When you're born here and lived here your entire life and benefited from the situation, your citizen privilege, check your citizen privilege. You are benefiting from this system, but you don't want to be subject to the laws? Anybody from Britain, including the Queen of England, is technically subject to American law. Yes, I don't know if you knew that. It's one of the reasons that an agreement has to be made for some monarchs. Sultans. You know, people running countries by autonomous power. Autocratic individuals. Duchies. Dictators. You have to follow the laws here if you're from another country. You have to follow the laws if you just simply exist here. But no, you're going to declare yourself ex post facto, long after you were 13, that's important, to be immune from the laws and being able to go around and bully people and say, I'm going to use the legal system to take your house from you because sovereign citizens do this shit all the time. Well, moronically calling themselves sovereign citizens, you want to benefit from a legal system where you can call the cops and get me chased after or swat me. But you don't want the laws to apply to you, and you don't want us to say you are benefiting and are being paid the contractual, social, or antisocial contract we have here, and I'm supposed to listen to this shit? Everyone is subject to the laws whether they're born here or not. You have to follow the laws whether you like it or not. One of the things people don't bring up. The only time you don't have that is if you are declared to be a representative of another country, and we can just kick you out. Diplomatic immunity. No, you don't have it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.